It's exactly 3 p.m. in Uganda, 8 a.m. in New York, 12 p.m. in London, and 8 p.m. in Beijing. So welcome everyone to this conversation for today, where we'll be hosting Dr. Qingxiu Bu from Sussex Uni to present a very interesting um, uh, um, research on the DRC, particularly how the DRC works with the West, but also China. We are keen on the DRC because, as we all know, at the moment, country is witnessing a full-blown conflict, particularly in the eastern parts of the DRC. So we thought it would be a timely conversation to have, first to understand how the DRC engages with China, and secondly, with the West, and then how all of these interactions play out in the face of the conflict now. So we're excited to have Professor Qingxiu Bu from me. I'll just introduce the professor a little bit so you can know. He's a very well published person in the areas of law, and he's on pretty much global challenges. He's very, very interested or keen on the development of legal infrastructure in transnational law, global governance. He's worked as a lecturer before at Cardiff Law School, but he's also worked at Queen's University Belfast, and I can also see that he's been at Georgetown Uni as an adjunct professor. So he's very, very, very well established in this field. He was also appointed as a Lee Cushing Professor of Practice at the Faculty of Law at McGill University in 2019. He has held visiting positions at various institutions, including Lund Uni in Sweden, the University College London in Ireland, Tel Aviv Uni in Israel, Max Planck Institute of Comparative and International Private Law in Germany. He's also worked as a docent at the Institute of Global Law and Policy, Harvard Law School, from January 2013 to 2014. He's completed 4 projects funded respectively by British Academy, Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Newton Fund, British Council, so many. So we are indeed very, very privileged to have the professor to, speak to us today. Prof, you're very much welcome. We are China-Uganda Research Network. And on this call also, we have Dr. Joshua Mugambwa, who is from the Makerere University Business School in Uganda, where our network is based. So I'll let Joshua welcome our audience today just in a minute, so that we can kick off exactly 3:05 p.m. in Uganda. And you'll have the opportunity to present your work in about 20 minutes. And we hope that after then, our audience can then engage with you in a Q&A. So dear members, welcome to this conversation. If you ever run into any issues, please let us know in the chat and we'll be able to assist you. Also, we are recording this conversation, so if you feel uncomfortable, please do let us know so we can see how to assist you. So Joshua, welcome.
Thank you, Joel. I take the opportunity to welcome all of you to this series of webinars we are hosting has introduced Dr. Qingxiu Bu from the University of Sussex. You will excuse me for the pronunciation of your name. I'm sure by the time we leave, you'll have taught us how to pronounce it well. China-Uganda Research Network is located at McLean University Business School, and particularly in the Faculty of Management. We hold a series of webinars, and this is one of them. The China-Uganda Research Network is a subsidiary of Chinese in Africa and Africans in China Global Research Network. It is an inclusive network that facilitates interactions, discussions, and analysis of issues concerning the Africa-China relations. So by doing that, it contributes to the knowledge base that we badly need so that it can guide policy decisions to shape the dynamic relationship between Uganda and China. And this relationship seems to be growing every other day. We have the main objective, and this is to promote research and dissemination of scholarly work, and also provide a platform for scholars to enhance their understanding of various issues that enable people understand the changing dynamics. However, we do all this with evidence so that the information that we lay to our population is evidence-based. So we carry out two key activities. One of them is a webinar series, and this is it. And the other one, podcast series, also hosted on our website. So with these activities, we provide a platform for in-depth understanding, analysis, and discussion of various topics relating to China-Uganda relations. I invite you to show interest if you have these studies that we can share. We also are interested in hosting any of you if you have these studies that you want to share with us. So with that, I welcome all of you to listen to our guest speaker tonight, Professor Bu from the University of Sussex. Joel, I think that is good from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Prof, please, the microphone is yours. If you'd like to add anything about you, which I did not say properly, please feel free to correct me and the audience. Thank
you. Okay, so good afternoon, good evening from where you are. And so it's a great honor to be hosted in this platform. So this is a very topical issue. And since September 2017, I started to work on China, Africa, and global governance. Around 3 years ago, I was lucky to secure Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Studies as a fellow there. And which gave me opportunity to explore. So how about the interaction, how about the game rules, how about the competition between manpowers? So how about Africa, and specifically we talk about DRC today. So it's a really great opportunity, and thank you again. I try to discuss about 3 key issues. One, so I try to use some data to exemplify how China dominates in global supply chain of critical mineral. The secondly, how about the West, especially the United States, and trying to catch up in this regard. Number three, I try to touch on a little bit global governance area. So I try to use my PPT. Let me see. So my title is, I can see it's very broad: China, the West, and the DRC, the geopolitical rivalry, resource diplomacy, and future global governance. So first of all, I start from the general framework, like 2030 SDGs, and in response to African Union's agenda and 2063. And interestingly, and 2063 actually ahead of and 2030 SDGs. So what's the next frontier for economic growth? And we can see 20th century, people say, yes, oil, but how about 21st century? Critical mineral. So let's formulate how Western and Chinese engagement that support DRC's development goals. So let me share with you this interesting picture. So we can see, like on the left side, and it's like enormous strategic leverage, and try to reshape the international order. So try to shape the strategy between the manpowers. So also, like from a West perspective, they try to work with allies to develop a united front, and dealing with China's a strategy that could shape global norms for decades and to come. So at the moment, and it's a battling for supremacy and it's a clean energy revolution. So it's a 21st century issue, the core challenge. And DRC in a major power rivalry and a global strategic competition. So we can see China has long dominated the critical mineral supply chain, and the great powers have limited motivations for involvement in military conflicts. So that's the key fact. So how about the great power competition in the DRC, and they may not necessarily be a zero-sum game. So China and Africa, and if we just go back around 20 years ago, we can see from FOCAC, then from Belt and Road Initiative, then another one we can say is the 10th anniversary of BRI in 2023. So from these three period, you can see China, Africa, how about 20 years on. So let me share with you some data. And between left and right, the left side is military presence. And to more extent, the United States dominates. And you can see the arrow, the DRC is central to African critical minerals. And from right side, and you can see in business economic development, China takes the lead. So FDI and trade, if we compare between United States and China, so you can see from the curve, and China and dominates. This from perspective foreign direct investment and trade in Africa. So let's move on until 2022, 3 years ago, China foreign direct investment flow and China, United States foreign direct investment flow in Africa. And especially from 2020, so we can see there's a big gap between China and the United States, and in terms of their foreign direct investment in Africa. So let's focus on a little bit about the topical issue today, extraction processing. So I provided you with certain a country and data. So you can see China dominates 90% of the global market for critical minerals. So Chinese firms control more than 50% of DRC's cobalt production and 80% of world's refinery capacities in China. So also China is responsible for about 98% of raw gallium and another critical minerals. So, and controversially, the dominance presents a supply chain or even national security risk and to the West. So from this 2022 until around 5 years later, 2030, so we pick up around 3 critical minerals here in terms of mining and refining. So we can see where we are here. One is like China, another one is like we can see this is DRC Congo. So you can see like China and Congo. So how about the mining, how about the refining, how about the percentage? And from the circle, the bigger, we can say the more percentage. So the rare sources take a similar shape. So if we can see like China and rare earths here, and if we can also DRC number 2 cobalt is like a DRC here. So you can see how China and DRC, their position in critical minerals in the world, global supply chains. So China percentage of global mining and processing, and also pick up certain critical minerals, and you can see the percentage here. So let's move to the percentage of transitional like mineral financing, and the data we can divide it into 3 periods. One is like a BRI, and the second is like early like a Belt and Road Initiative. The third one is a later period of like a Belt and Road Initiative. So from this like transition, so you can see the percentage change, so which means China take different strategies in this regard. And from the second data, so you can see like China PRC ownership, and from 90% just like move to 84%. But from host countries ownership, and from 20% just increasingly, we can say like just steadily increasing, and to 32%, this data by 2021. So another percentage of China transition mineral lending. The reason I share with you this, because you can see China dominates in critical, we can say mineral global supply chain. Probably you could ask the reason why behind such dominance. So we can see from this is state-owned policy bank. Another one is like a little bit deeper color. Dark color is like state-owned commercial banks. So behind this is China's like policy banks and commercial banks anchored, reinforced such dominance. So briefly, like a Belt and Road Initiative is a manifestation of China's global aspiration, and a geopolitical tool to increase China's global influence. As I just said, it's reinforced through state-backed financial support, policy banks and commercial banks. So people could talk about the issue. It's not focused today. It's like a data burden. We can see like the Congo is almost like more than 50%, 53.4%. We can see this one, like Congo. So now let's move to like the Congo, DRC. And as everybody knows here, every December, like Transparency International issued like a CPI. So just the latest one, we can see like DRC is ranked 163 out of 180 countries. So it's really, like tricky. It's really, really critical like a market. So let's move to another data. So if we can see like this Congo, and regarding governance, the darker we can say the less, the undeveloped in like governance. So this like DRC, the China is around here. So regarding ease of doing business in DRC, so we can see the data also is not friendly to DRC. It's really, really low in figures. So we can see like DRC has one of the most difficult, most challenging business environment in the world. So there are 2 positions, and from west and from east. Which is like from west, we can say they just turn away, but the mismanaged mining project contributed to violence and conflict across the DRC. So, but from China side, still get involved. So this is the picture I can share with you. Although there's a reputational risk, although there's a very challenging environment for business, but there are 2 different stances. One turn away, but another one getting involved more. So so we can see like if we say rule of law is very low figure. If we say guarantee the contract, we can enforcement also like not good performance. So and when the West just left the field, this gives China more and wider opening to consolidate its position in the DRC. To some extent, as I just shared with you, the data is dominant. So this is where we are in DRC. You can see is how critical, how important, like mineral riches. So DRC at the moment, we can see is the critical mineral race heats up. And if we just look at the right side, you can see it's like number 2 in the rank. Yeah. And mineral essential for global energy transition, as everybody knows here. And the China-US war shifts to green critical mineral area. So DRC at the moment is like crossroads of geopolitical competition between like China and the West. So we can see the general picture, minerals and metals import from Africa to 3 main powers, US, China, and the EU. We can see the red color, the curve, China just dramatically climbed up. So the major suppliers of critical mineral to the United States. So from this data, I can share with you, and that's why United States feel uncertain, because they're worried. What if there's a disruption of such supplying? So we can see like China, you can see the red color, and also you can DRC is like a little bit darker blue. So you can see how they are important, how they, to some extent, like United States relied on a lot on China's suppliers of critical minerals. So a vast sum of parts, we can say China control the so-called new 3, like solar, like EVs, and also we can say like batteries. So the mineral demand for EVs until 2050, so you can see we can say it's steadily increasing. So like EV sales boom to underpin cobalt demand. This like indirectly contributes to such conflicts. So the total mineral demand also like pick up certain critical minerals until we can say 3 periods, 2020, 2030, until 2040. So you can see how they will be demanded. So the mineral used in EVs, so from left and from right, we just compare like 21st century's new greener technology and the conventional cars, how they are different from this. You can compare between each other. So EV like battery supply chains. So United States and EU, to some extent they are vulnerable. To some extent they rely a lot on China dominance because they in especially critical mineral, we can say manufacturing and processing. So more importantly, in certain area, China even takes around 90+%. So as we just shared, China dominates the downstream as well in EV's battery supply chain. So you can see like different critical mineral and different data. So also like in left side, I just listed such countries, so you can see. And Congo is number 4 here. So the cases of cobalt in DRC exactly highlights how China has come to control much of this critical mineral. 80% of DRC cobalt output is owned by Chinese companies, refined in China and sold to battery factories around the world, to EU, to United States, and another critical mineral copper as well. So another data and regarding and lithium, and China controls about 59%. So the data predictably until 2031. So supply chain vulnerabilities is like this like a mineral we pick up here is up to midstream capabilities, geographically connected. So you can see like the circle, we just divide into 6 geographical locations, China, EU, United States, and other 3 areas. So China has secured very advantageous supply chain. And we can see the 3 critical minerals. You can see the respectively the percentage. and give you very clear picture how China's dominant position is. So, and if we compare with different countries, like China's resource strategy actually starting dozens of years ago. They step by step from infrastructure like contribution until now's dominance position. So China's approach, as I just mentioned, is strongly characterized by state-backed investment, as I just mentioned, policy banks and commercial banks, and to ensure and China can secure long-term access to resources. So probably question come up, is China set to dominate the next industrial revolution? So China, as we just discussed, has systematically increased involvement in Africa over 20 years. And a company based in China, they own or operate like such critical minerals. But China also plays a very complex role. For instance, the approach to governance is very much linked or related to its own experience. And I'm sure most of you study Chinese law or environment, supply chain, or different area. And 20 years ago, China followed a very, we can say, it's not very environment-friendly policy. So pollution, then cure. So we can see the Congo, like similar appearance here, regarding soil erosion, regarding pollution. Also, they got some illegal mining operations. And February 28th, 2022, there was a case brought to the court, this last one, regarding China's illegal mining operation. So this also drew the Western attention. So there was a hearing on child labor and human rights violations in DRC's mining industry. So this issue brought to the United States, and also they introduced the measure and to ban those imported products if they contain cobalt and copper and from such, we can say, abusive environment. So on the one hand, they withdrew, they turned away. So probably we could ask another question, what impact this has on the global supply chain and in critical mineral area? So could we say there's another more viable alternative to China's investment? And there's a big question mark here. So the US, so they should secure a supply chain for critical minerals, but on the other hand, they should also bring benefit to the DRC. So we would not necessarily like one after another discuss, but the RRA 2022, like EU regulation 2017, and very recent like Critical Raw Material Act 2024, and also like 2 years ago, EU also introduced a very ambitious like a due diligence directive. So US government, they started to act to deepen critical mineral cooperation with Africa. So they try to build resilience and they try to de-risk and to move away a little bit, like we can say, dependency or reliance on China in critical mineral supply chain. So this is like 2 initiatives the United States has taken around 3 years ago, 2022. One is a 13-member mineral security partnership. Another one is a Sustainable Critical Mineral Alliance. So how can critical mineral partnership, they could serve both like African and United States interests. So from this initiative, we can say they try to promote responsibly sourced like artisanal and cobalt. So we can see they try to counter China's dominance. And the one initiative, so they try to like sign the MOU between United States, DRC, and Zambia. So this is a good sign, which means they change their stance, like turn away, withdraw. Now they try to determine to reduce dependence on China. Then they try to reinstall, they try to re-engage like with the DRC. So this is their strategic, especially in December 2022 with the summit in White House. But another critical issue coming back again, can the United States step up its game in the DRC? On the one hand, it's like a secret route. On the other hand, it's like a Lobito development corridor. So probably we could say, can the West, especially the United States, make up for lost time. So very interesting also said, while America slept, China became indispensable. So now United States now is in now. So whether they can provide a more viable alternative to China investment because of certain issues in environment, in corruption, in like a very poor governance. So, but the issue is the conflict is a deterrent. So let's see, like another issue, and everybody talk a lot about a resource curse. So let's see whether DRC they can escape from such curse, if we say it's a curse. Excuse me. Cobalt is a main ingredient in, we can say, EVs, in batteries. So at the moment, DRC is the world's largest producer. So we can see this is like step by step by 2030, like different countries with regard to their critical mineral. So their market is forecast to be oversupplied until 2030, and the continued supply had weighed down on cobalt prices. So we probably need to worry a little bit whether resource curse is still there. So are Chinese mining companies pushing down the price of cobalt? So from the Bloomberg's data, so especially from like we can say 2022, they just like dramatically went down. So now we ask the very long-standing issue whether DRC can escape from such resource curse. But if we just say like there's evidence from Botswana, it's another country, also rich in minerals. So we could like have a certain hypothesis. We should not exacerbate the resource curse dynamic. So this crisis shares roots in the governance values. So can the DRC take advantage? Can they improve the resilience and equity of supply chains? So from like a Western perspective, so they try to bring about one after another guidance, like convention, and we can say regulation or even law. So they try to bring greener, they try to more sustainable, like we can say it's like a more equitable approaches. But it seems to us at the moment, there's inadequate solution to such crises. Why? Because it has not helped to reduce violence. Because that's interesting when it's the cause, when the result. So the leverage on standards on norm making. When we talk about standards, when we talk about norm making, it's always like culture. It always take time. So put differently, DRC's transformation will not happen overnight. It takes time, it will take years. So the main powers, EU, United States, and China, they should be ready to help DRC to help themselves by creating realistic, step-based system for cooperation. So as we know, like FOCAC, and as also we know, like FCATA 2019. So also like between United States and China and like Africa, they got a partnership here. So now I move to the very like a key issue, also very topical, very related issue. As everybody knows, like Ukraine and Russia, and they got like such a deals that Ukraine just approached the United States whether they could use minerals and for security. And the DRC could be inspired by such a proposal. That's why we try to compare like one China's perspective, minerals for infrastructure, another one, minerals for security. So let's try to see whether they could be viable alternatives. So the first question, is China's role in DRC exploitative or developmental? So from the so-called contract century, it has not brought about expected or reasonable benefit for Congolese people. So number two, DRC, United States, such a mineral deal, they could break China dominant to some extent. But another interesting issue is whether it's snub to China, not necessarily, but they could reshape the global critical mineral market in theory. But it's fraught with enormous challenges that concern of over at least 4 issues. One, political instability, corruption, environmental issues, and labor rights like violations. So this does not necessarily mean the DRC had made a diplomatic U-turn and just the turn side of West, but not China. So China's construction, they have brought a lot of like infrastructure development and to some extent benefit a wider society. It's true. So African pivots to China's global security initiative. So this is not an interesting issue because China introduced 3 initiatives. Like we can say it's like civilization, development, and security. So at the moment, DRC is a conflict. So whether China's global security initiative could make sense in current very, we can say it's like a disaster in Congo, DRC. So this is like contribution from China, but success requires alignment with the AU's Agenda 2063. They can ensure China's security initiative, they can support African-led solutions. If we go into more details, so we can see how China or DRC Africa, they could leverage China's global security initiatives for DRC's security challenges. So we can see in principle that the global norm maker, China, the new brand, so-called China's GSI. But in the DRC, like a GSI-backed initiative, they could boost AU-led peacekeeping. I just highlighted here. However, China's conflict resolution role remains very vague, very unclear. We have not seen very clear picture how China's global security initiative had helped contributed and to, we can say, address such like a very crisis conflict. But we could think if China move away from traditional non-interference policy, maybe they can assume a larger diplomatic role in DRC like conflicts at the moment. So, but from another gentleman who's David Shambo, like 10 years, like actually like 12 years ago, and he mentioned China remains very much a partial power and only offers some other countries economic relationship. So not necessarily ready, sensible to contribute to such conflict, we can say resolution. So is the proposed US DRC deal more viable? But I just critically explore the issue. So in principle, like from prima facie, it's okay. But from democracy, from like governance and to economic development, it's starting at a very initiative is strong, but rarely to push it to the end from the previous experience. So DRC is in a unique position to balance, and on the one hand, to accrue the economic and diplomatic benefits. On the other hand, they can be on their own DRC's turn. So the energy transition, like in 21st century, is a great opportunity for DRC's transition. So they must tackle corruption, and China, we can say, remain dominant position in the long run to some extent. DRC, they can leverage the position for more favorable terms on the one hand with the West, on the other with China. So let's move to the last issue very briefly, like global governance as an overall. So global governance at a crossroads. So probably you cannot say, yeah, we are in a much luckier position, but global challenge, global solution towards better global governance. We are in the same boat. So that's another theory. There's a non-zero-sum game, US-China tension. How can DRC avoid being caught in the new Cold War? So we can say in the new great game, there's no zero-sum like result. So let me share with you, like one is zero-sum, another one is non-zero-sum. So I could say not zero-sum in extractive sector. Geopolitical tension, national security priorities, they cause in a renewed Cold War. People always say, yes, zero-sum. They actually very harmfully limit the option for all involved parties, EU, United States, and China, and also Africa, DRC. So advance the global consensus on governance pathway. 3 main powers, they have taken very different approaches. An approach to global governance have to be rooted in recognition. It's like inclusive global governance. So let's move to African agency. African agency is a very innovative term. It's perceived as like multifaceted approaches in nature, just like trying to incorporate in state and non-state actors. So we need to strengthen the building capacity to negotiate and bargain with such manpowers and on DRC's term. So DRC's future in such a changing global order. So of course, DRC will not put all eggs in one basket. So most African countries, they desire good relations and with China and with West as well. Partnerships must ultimately on the DRC's own terms. So DRC's challenges, we will not like repeat. And how about the strategies? So will the US strategy toward DRC weaken China's influence Africa? So if we from like a zero-sum theory, could be. But if we just regard this issue from different perspective, non-zero-sum is not necessary. So that's why I said, however, US and China's goals in Africa, they do not necessarily conflict. And the engagement of both manpower, they could be advantageous, and not only to each other, but also to Africa and to the DRC. So let's go skip a little bit over about US China's development initiative, security initiative, and civilization initiative. So let me wrap up today's discussion with around 3 or 4 hypotheses. One, like a global value chain enhancement. So DRC definitely they need climb up and to the global value chain's upper end. Number 2 is how to update the legal regulatory framework. So we can see EU and the United States, West countries, they bring one after another laws, regulation, acts, but whether they are realistic at this stage. So how they can update, make a realistic framework to address the current issue. So number 3, how to catalyze public and private investment. This is the core issue. We just described is a beautiful picture there. That's very rich in critical minerals. But how about private actors? Public actors, they can make policies. They can use like those incentives. But how can they incentivize private actors to invest, to trade, to get involved, to get engaged in the DRC? So this is the key issues. That's why I just said like one of the China's key strengths is they can use public power and private power. So it's aligned each other between public and private. But Western countries is different. It's really, really challenging for them to incentivize private actors to get involved. So that's why I would say United States, they should create attractive conditions for its own private companies to build sustainable partnerships with DRC companies. Otherwise, they will go nowhere without tangible economic benefits behind them. My last hypothesis, climate justice, 21st century, is a great, great thing, but they would need a just transition. This is like inclusive economy in global governance perspective. And although DRC is short of comprehensive policy in this regard, but we cannot at the expense of DRC's, for instance, at the moment, conflict like craft, environmental, and so-called like a resource curse still there, and they cannot escape from resource curse. So probably another quick issue is whether ESG could work, could be secure. So very finally, we can say conclusion. One, from Brussels to Washington, concerns over access to criminal mineral, we can say it's the time always like in the middle of escalating tensions between West and China, but they still got opportunities to meaningfully improve the way, update existing REP framework, adopt ESG, move up like a value chain globally, and we can also critical mineral access is not zero-sum game. DRC, they should leverage opportunity to strengthen and safeguard its supply chains. So we should convert like resource advantages into development advantages. This is the whole Africa, also is DRC's like the very, very prioritized commitment. So as you can see, we are witnessing the history through such debates. We need more solid evidence to support the fall hypothesis. More significantly, we need to translate these findings, these strategies into policy. We need more strategic thinking. We need more theoretically informed and empirical evidence for further research in such a cutting-edge area. So I thank you again for your attention. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for your very, very wonderful presentation. I think personally, I've enjoyed your presentation. I don't know for the rest. I think it's time for us now to have a conversation with the presenter. So if you've got a question, now is the time for you to ask. So you can just raise your hand up and then we'll pick you and you'll be able to ask your question. Alternatively, you can also put your questions in the chat so that the speaker can read them. We have only 13 minutes left. So let's see if there's anyone with a question now. Any questions? So if there are no questions, I'll go and ask my question to the speaker. I've enjoyed how you presented, you know, the way the DRC engages with the West vis-a-vis with China. So in recent days, we've seen the US President Donald Trump propose a deal, a mining deal, particularly with the DRC. So I would like to ask this question because we've seen a similar situation also happen in Eastern Europe, where the president is also trying to make a deal with the Ukrainian president so that if ever they will intervene in Ukraine, then they would also want to gain some, you know, economic benefits from Ukraine. So are we seeing a similar situation play out in the DRC? So in other words, is the US going to intervene in the DRC's security sector with the hopes that it will gain economic benefits? Then secondly, is this happening because the war in Eastern DRC has disrupted supply chains, and China, which has been the leading, you know, country in the MONUSCO peacekeeping in the DRC, has also withdrawn. So literally what I'm saying is that since the withdrawal of the UN peacekeeping in the DRC, China's direct political engagement with the DRC has not been seen. You know, a lot of its engagements has been through the UN Security Council under the MONUSCO peacekeeping. So is this leaving a vacuum that the United States can, you know, engage bilaterally with the DRC, since China mostly focuses on its non-interference policy? I don't know if that makes sense. That's what I had for you. I've also seen two other hands up. Maybe you can pick all of them and then you can respond at once. So Anthony, how about you ask your question?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Anthony Ngeru. I am the I'm the co-founder of Kenya China Research Consortium back in Kenya, and my question mostly revolves around the new U.S. administration. I'd like to know, because there are some, of course, the kinds of how can I put it? Of course, the US believes more in capitalism and China in socialism. And with the new Trump administration coming in, we've seen some very, very radical changes in terms of policy. I'd take an example of the USAID issue, where specifically in Kenya, more than 40,000 workers have had to be laid off, and 400,000 others have been indirectly affected. I'd want to understand how does some of these radical policy changes by the US affect China's investments in Africa, and particularly in Kenya? And if you have any other resources in regards to the same, you can also share. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your question. Let's pick Joshua.
Thank you.
Yes, Joshua.
Very much, Professor, for your presentation. We've really enjoyed it. I have a few comments. Maybe you can respond to them or not. I'm wondering how DRC, how China is trying to consolidate its position in a context where DRC is in conflict. Yes, because you said there's some efforts to see that China consolidates its position in DRC. Then what policies do you recommend for DRC amidst geopolitical rivalry? Yet China needs to benefit from these resources, and also DRC actually needs to benefit from its critical resources like cobalt. The other one relates again to the resource curse. I note that there's an initiative that you call sustainable and ethical mining practices that involves 13 countries. I hope China is one of them. But most importantly, how do you think cooperation can be possible to create peace and stability in DRC, yet many of these countries that are involved are benefiting from the chaos because they tend to exploit the chaos and also exploit the resources that are there, especially, for example, banning of conflict minerals. Is it possible that, because this is existent, but even then minerals seem to be coming from DRC and actually going to this developed world? So thank you. Those are the comments that you can respond to. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. I think the speaker can now respond to the three questions asked.
Yeah, thank you, Juro. Thank you, the two colleagues, for your questions. Very good question. And for instance, like you mentioned, just like the deal, and interesting, I think it's very cutting edge approaches. And people said, oh, inspired by Ukraine, like approach, saying like China previously, we can say infrastructure for minerals, or now minerals for security. So as you guys can see from screen here, yeah, something probably similar as everybody here, we can see the main purposes and try to bring the very powerful, we can say, US's involvement and to address the current conflict or wars. And this self-evidence is very clear. But also, as I mentioned in my presentation today, almost all main powers, they are very hesitant to get involved like a military, we can say, conflicts in such circumstances. So this is not something like a rule, it's like it's a factual issue, so they're not. And especially also as from my presentation, you can see between China and the West powers, and economically, business, financial, securities, and also investment, trade, and such infrastructure, especially infrastructure construction, and China dominates. But on the other hand, regarding security, regarding military, of course, like from like if we compare between China and the West, and the United States dominates. And so there's something similar, but also there's something very, we can say, like that, different. To more extent, as I just explained, this is very different between China's approaches and West approaches. For instance, the China approaches, and there's a very strategic, that overall, and if I'm right, correct me otherwise, during the last 20, 30 years, even 40 years, at the very beginning regarding infrastructure, and at that time, they may not necessarily have been profitable. But in the long run, strategically, and for strategic purposes, and step by step, they built, for instance, like infrastructures now, and they get more and more dominant in certain critical minerals. And so this is like a so-called state-owned company or state champion companies. So at whatever prices, so they try to move ahead to be dominant. Now it's time to harvest. But on the other hand, as also we just mentioned, in the Western world, it's different. Like we have to everything attributed to who will be the primary actors. Like the government, as I said, they can make policies, so they can make like partnerships, so they can approach many initiatives. Also, they can use like law regulating soft power, whatever. And for them, they always have a very something at stake is risk and profit, risk and benefit. So we cannot necessarily say like we should not be like strong risk aversion. But if the risk outweighs, we can overwhelmingly the potential profit, as I just mentioned, there's no guarantee for the property rights. There's no guarantee for the contract enforcement. And also there's reputational, even litigation risks regarding human rights, labor, child labor, forced labor, modern slavery, and also some other pollution environment issues. I think many Western private companies that with very hesitant to move ahead. So this is like a big difference. So another one also is very interesting. And we can see China, although they proposed like 3 initiatives, leave aside another, we can civilization development, but especially security. So here is very vague. It's not clear at all how China's security perspectives and get involved to play a critical role in this regard. But another, I just combined, another question together is about China. You mentioned about a very new Trump government. Yes, definitely you are right. So, and from my understanding, of course, it's only personal opinion, and so it's like from materialism and mechanism. Yes, they are not wrong, but from soft power perspective, we can say smart power, soft power, hard power. From soft power perspective, I don't think it's in the long run is viable. So everything they use their own way. It's in the long run, it's not good for soft power. And in this regard, China just fill in the gap. And if they withdraw, so China just fill in the gap. So in your word, you said that's very radical, like move, radical change, and compared with the Biden government. So some other issues. I think at this stage, probably I would listen to more colleagues' comments. I think is more important. If anybody give more comments, I want to listen.
All right, thank you, Prof, for your responses. There is a question in the chat from Flogencia, who says that she comes from Kamwenge. Kamwenge is in Uganda. It's a district very close to the DRC. As you know, the DRC borders Uganda, the west. So currently we have a very high refugee influx into Uganda from DRC. So she's concerned that the U.S. aid cut, particularly the attack on USAID, is affecting refugees, the conflict in the DRC. So how can China be of help? Is there a way China can step in to fill the vacuum? That's what she's asking.
Can I respond very briefly? I think the time is almost up. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's to some extent, as I just mentioned, like between materialism and soft power perspective. But this is so not only topical, but it's so new. It's really most cutting edge, most like we can latest development in this regard. So people had not got opportunity to respond, and this applies to China as well. As we know, like China, they got very comprehensive approaches. Although security, military perspective, and the United States, Western countries still dominate. But from other like soft power approaches, China is steadily increasing and in terms of investment, as I just mentioned from my talk, HOCAC and like like some other different approaches on the Belt and Road Initiative. And in this regard, I think from my personal opinion, and in the reasonable time, I think later on, and to more extent, of course, not everything, just like without selectively, but I think in the middle run, in the longer run, and China would fill the gap from my understanding, because whatever, and we got a PPT, but we did not have time to explore more. So whatever, like Africa as a whole, and it's like a voting, it's like over 55, 56 votes, and for China's, we can say global engagement, global governance, and in United Nations and institutions. I trust when from foreign aid perspective, from soft law, from soft power, from materialism perspectives, and China will step in. China will fill the gap. But as I said, like it's too short time, it's too new, and China has not responded, we can say, immediately. I myself in general is optimistic in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts on this. Members, I think it's 2 minutes past our time, unless anyone on the call has a really burning question. I would say we have come to the end of our conversation. As for me, I would just say thank you once again, Prof, for the time you spent to share your wisdom with us, and we hope we can have you again to discuss a different topic. I would now say that for me, we've come to the end. Joshua, unless you want to close, I'd say thank you, everyone. Afternoon and a good night.
Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you for time. Thank you for attention. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Bye.